Welcome to an episode of InRange. We're doing another of our 101 practical shooting series here with Sinistral Rifleman.
Yep.
And what we're going to talk about today is the state of iron sights in 2025, or iron sights in general. Like, what's their application now in the world we live in today?
Yeah, and you know what kind of triggered this conversation for me was I was getting some sales flyers about red dots,
Mm-hmm.
and Hollow Sun has red dots available at retail now for like $120.
Yep.
Which puts them at sometimes less than the same price as buying iron sights to put on your rifle.
Yeah, BUIS, backup iron
Right.
sights, right? Like, this is literally a red dot cheaper.
Correct.
Okay. And so there's two things to talk about here, and I think we should break it up into those components. One is rifles, and one is pistols. But let's start with rifles, because that's where we think about this, I think, the most.
Right.
Now, back in 2017, during the beginnings of the What Would Stoner Do project, I made a statement that is still to this day controversial, and I still see people complaining about, in which we designed the build without really even the ability, although it was possible to retrofit, but it wasn't designed with iron sights in mind. And I said then, with proper high quality optics, whether it's a red dot, an LPVO, or something else, an ACOG, a prism, iron sights are really kind of irrelevant, and you want the rail space for other stuff, lasers, lights, IR, all that stuff. And so why bother with irons when your optic is so likely to never fail and you need the rail space for other stuff? Now, maybe that was a little premature in 2017, but I don't think we were wrong.
No, and I mean, I still use backup irons on a lot of my rifles, but it's really just there to placate the machine spirit.
Like, you do it for the feels, right?
Right. Like
yeah.
I can't think of any incident where going to backup iron sights on a rifle would have actually helped me at a match.
Mm-hmm.
Now, about a decade ago, I had a Vortex red dot, one of the cheaper ones, go bad on me in the middle of a match.
2015, we're talking.
Yeah, around that time frame. Now, going to the backup irons in the middle of the stage wouldn't have helped me under those circumstances,
Sure.
given the type of shooting I was doing. And by going bad, I mean like the zero was just off and weird. Right?
Okay.
But I haven't had a red dot fail on me on a rifle in a very long time.
Mhm.
Even the cheaper ones keep getting better.
Yeah,
over
they do.
Time.
The cheapest red dots now, not the cheapest. I mean, you can definitely underspend. It's possible. Like, you can throw a Monstrum on there and have
Right.
a red dot that looks like a flare that doesn't have a zero, right? You can do that. But like, if you're buying a red dot sight that is designed and intended to be used on an actual rifle, Hollow Sun is a good example. Vortex is still an example. Or you spend more and you get something from EOTech or someone like that. All of this stuff is so much better than it was then that the low end of it is probably better than the high end 10 years ago. Or at least equivalent.
Right. And now with the price of the red dots being like $120, like there's an honest consideration of like, why not just put on an additional red dot?
Yeah, so I mean, okay, so one of the things I think the statement I made in 2017 was you don't need backup irons, and that then made people think you don't ever need backups. And I guess I did kind of say these things just don't fail.
Right.
Now, that's not true. There's always something that fails. They're mechanical devices. But in the grand scheme of things, with the amount of shooting you do, you're saying you haven't really seen that be the case. Not really.
Right. And you know what? I just remembered another incident. It was on a heavier recoiling gun with a cheaper red dot.
When was this?
Like back in 2021-ish,
So
2022.
4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah. So like, again, different set of circumstances where the gun recoiled harder and like the gun recoiling made the battery.
What
like,
was
come
it?
loose.
It was a cheaper one, though.
Yeah, it was another Vortex.
Yeah, but if you had thrown on like an ACOG or something like that, that wouldn't be the case.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Okay. So I mean, you get what you pay for to a degree, but I guess I shouldn't have necessarily said you don't need backups. Although I still argue there's a good chance you won't, but you are, I guess, playing the odds.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to have backup now, should it be iron sights or should it be just another red dot sight?
Yeah, or a laser if you're doing night vision stuff.
Night vision's different, right?
Right.
But like, you're looking. So let's say you've got an LPVO, which those don't fail. Have you ever heard of an LPVO failing even?
No, like your battery runs dead and you still have a black etched reticle.
Yeah, but you could have a stacked red dot or a 45-degree red dot, and that's backup.
Right, because realistically, you're not pulling the scope off your rifle. Most mounts don't have QD capability. Even the ones that do, it's QD-ish if you have it tightened enough to actually hold 0.
Mm.
So, having the offset or stacked red dot is definitely a better option than going to your iron sights.
I feel like so much of this is rooted in like lore or fantasy, and I know that offends the audience when we say this, but even in practical real world applications in combat, and a bullet hits your primary optic, don't you think you got bigger problems than trying to take that off the gun to get to your red dot?
Well, and
Or backup irons for that
therein
matter?
lies the problem, right? A lot of the things that'll kill your primary optic
Yeah.
would kill the rifle itself.
Could. It may not,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Or
the operator.
right.
And that's there are examples of that not happening. In fact, there was an ACOG back in the GWAT that I remember they used as a promotional thing where it literally had a round hit it, and the bullet stopped it. Like the ACOG stopped the bullet.
Right.
And they were saying the ACOG, ironically, they said the ACOG still worked. Do you remember that? It was there was a bullet through the shell. Like there's an example of it got hit and it still worked. But this QD switch to backup thing, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily realistic. Now, here's the other factor, too. Ammo has gotten more and more expensive.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And I think we've both been fortunate that we learned how to shoot when ammo was relatively cheap versus the current price versus dollar value.
Although we didn't think it was cheap then.
No.
And people 10 years from now are going to think what we got now is probably cheap.
Right. But ammo's price has outstripped the rate of inflation.
Absolutely.
Over time,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So someone starting fresh today and ammo for a 223 being, 42 to 45 cents a round.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's a good use of their funds if you're trying to become functional with the gun to put a lot of effort into mastering iron sights. Like if you have the same amount of time and money available, you're better served getting good with the red dot. And if you have irons, great, have a rudimentary understanding of how they work. But like, I wouldn't put a lot of time and training focus into getting good with irons.
Well, I mean, let's be realistic. How often do we see people that are new to this that get a red dot sight, whether a low end or a mid end or a high end, and they have a hard time learning, because this is a learning curve, getting a good 0 on the red dot.
Right.
Now let's add into that a good or at least reasonably capable 0 on backup iron sights.
Yeah, most new shooters can't do that. I mean, we've seen it in matches. I've seen it running classes. A lot of times with rifle classes, you end up spending like the first part of the day just making sure everyone has a good 0 on their gun.
Yep.
And just using an optic shortcuts that whole process.
You know what's funny about that is there's an AK laying on the table, but we go back to some older military doctrine and discipline that wasn't just Soviet, it was also American, in that on the primary marksmanship instruction section of training for a soldier, like the original M16 didn't really have adjustable iron sights. It had zeroable iron sights.
Right.
But not adjustable iron sights. The windage was like you had to use a tool or at least a bullet. The front was you needed a tool or at least a bullet. But it wasn't something you just casually modified or changed.
Right.
Then as the M16 turned into the M16A2, the Marines specifically wanted very adjustable elevation and windage, not because there was practical application in combat, but because they wanted better scores on their known distance 500-meter qualifying range.
Right.
When you look at the AK, not adjustable sights, maybe elevation, but that's it.
And wasn't their doctrine that the armor zeroed them?
Gun was zeroed, you got it. You go back to World War II, bolt action rifles, not the M1, but most bolt action rifles didn't have any adjustability except for elevation. The gun was zeroed from the armor, here it was, or you zeroed it in training and then that was it. So why did we get to this point where everything needs to have 5,000 knobs and adjustability with 3 backups when the reality is you're not going to actually do that? And the principle should be have a good 0 on your primary sighting system as your primary goal, and backups are, frankly, backup and secondary.
Right. And one of the things I've run into dealing with customers selling rifles is when they do use backup iron sights, they don't understand that a free float tube mounted front sight does not actually hold 0. It's mounted to a free float tube.
That's the point of a free float tube.
Right. So it is a backup sight. If you're going to use irons as a primary sighting system, the front sight has to be attached to the barrel. Like I wouldn't recommend using backup irons mounted to a free float tube, because anytime you load weight onto it, you use it for supporting positions, your 0 is changing.
Now, before the audience goes in, are we talking about just the carbon fiber ones on What Would Stoner Do, or any free float
I'm talking
tube?
about any free float tube.
Except some extremely heavy steel rigid nonsense.
Right.
which makes the gun unwieldy half the time.
Right. Now, I'm not saying you can't hit a man-sized target to 200 yards with them.
No, because we still put lasers on them and hit stuff with it.
Right.
Yes.
But the point being is if it's a primary sighting system, you want it attached to the barrel. And people have somewhat unrealistic accuracy expectations out of, MBUS sights mounted to a free float tube.
For those in the audience that don't understand a free float tube, what it is the barrel doesn't contact the handguard whatsoever. The handguard literally floats and is mounted to the upper receiver. And the point of that is that any pressure applied to that float tube, whether it's up, left, or right, doesn't affect where the actual barrel is going to impact based on the sighting system mounted on the gun itself.
Right.
Because the free float tubes moving is irrelevant. And normally there's all free float tubes have flex, and you'll frequently see like IR lasers on them, but for the most part, and we've certainly learned this at night vision matches, most people don't use IR sighting systems past 50 yards.
Right.
Maybe 100. We do shoot further than that, but that starts becoming like a real ask.
Right. And having the passive aiming capability through your primary optic at those further targets is more of an advantage the further out they get.
So, in summary on rifles, the cost of a backup red dot sight, if you think you need a backup, is frequently cheaper than that of a backup iron sight. And the skills for a backup iron sight are specialized and maybe in 2025 no longer necessarily particularly relevant. And if you're going to learn how to shoot with a red dot or an LPVO or both, maybe your backup should be what you already are familiar with and save the money on ammunition to make sure that you have the skill and zero on your gun, on your primary sighting system, than just another thing to bolt on.
Yep.
Is that a summary?
Yeah, I would say iron sights on rifles in current year is a vanity skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's still fun for some people to compete in those divisions with iron sights. It is a harder shooting challenge. But if you're a new shooter with limited funds, limited time, I would start with optics.
So you heard it here. I was right in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
No, but you came to me about this,
Yes.
not about that. No, I agree, and that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully that's interesting to you. And so if you were to put a backup red dot on, because you don't want to do a backup iron, 45-degree offset, stacked?
I think 45-degree offset is probably the most natural to use for most people. Because stacking requires, obviously less or no cheek weld, and you're dealing with way more bore offset, which can be okay when you're shooting at like rather large targets,
Yep.
but you end up being about 3.5 to 4 inches off the bore versus your primary optic on an AR-15, and that can cause issues making your hits at close ranges if you're not really familiar with that offset. And if it's 45-degree offset, the height over bore is essentially the same.
Yep. And you can offset a 45-degree red dot on any other primary sighting system. You can do it to an LPVO. You could do it to an existing red dot.
Yep.
Or a holographic, whatever you got on there. You can always throw a 45-degree offset on.
Yep.
You can't always stack.
Right.
Unless you get really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. There it is. All right. Well, if you like this sort of honest, legitimate content that isn't going to be promoted by the algorithm, consider supporting us. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. We're completely supported by viewers like you. YouTube does not promote educational content, and a conversation about whether or not you should have iron sights is not clickbait. Is that the word?
No, we're definitely not going to, rocket to the top of the YouTube front page with this.
No, we're talking to the audience that actually cares about this topic diligently. So that's you. If that's you, consider supporting us. If you already are, thank you so much. You've kept the channel alive for 10 years. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. Otherwise, click subscribe, click the bell. Don't be surprised when you don't get a notification. But if you think this was a worthwhile conversation, share this with your friends and new gun owners that are having these conversations right now, because these are things that we've learned over decades, quite honestly. And I understand some of your mileage may not vary, but this is where we come to from this. And frankly, it's weird how many people that have shot for decades like you or I or other people we talk to honestly come to the same conclusions, right? All right. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.